Welcome to the debate. What if I told you that, well, almost every single bullet point on your resume, even the career accomplishments you are most, incredibly proud of, is technically a fiction?
A fiction? I mean, that sounds a bit aggressive, doesn't it?
Well, maybe not a lie, necessarily, but a mere claim, right? A statement asking the world for blind faith.
Yeah, okay, I see what you mean. And honestly, when you really dig into the living professional record or, the LPR methodology, that is exactly where we have to start. Because right now we are currently swimming in the sea of unverified professional claims.
Exactly.
And it's making it basically impossible to know who can actually do the work.
Right. So today we are dissecting a pretty brutal, unbending rule of professional representation, drawn directly from the LPR source material. A claim is not proof.
Right.
A claim is just a statement that asks the reader to believe something about the worker. Like if someone states, I led a team, that is a claim. I improved a process is a claim. I communicate well, or, I know AI tools. These are all claims, and they might be entirely true.
Sure.
But they need evidence. Without verifiable internal evidence, they remain what the methodology calls generic professionalism. So my stance today is one of strict evidentiary foundationalism. We absolutely must demand evidence before wording.
And, I look at that strict foundationalism and I see a system that unfairly penalizes the worker for the messy reality of modern business.
How so?
We are going to silence valid lived experience simply because, say, a manager forgot to track the data or a company policy blocked the employee from keeping their own work samples.
Well, let's ground this right away with a realistic scenario because the stakes here are incredibly high.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think about a mid-level manager, let's call her Sarah. So she's trying to update her professional profile. And she types out, I know AI tools, and I led a cross-functional AI transition team. In our current hiring ecosystem, what happens next?
Oh, I know this one.
Right. Those statements get polished by some generative text tool to sound more aggressive. They get slapped onto a resume and fed into an applicant tracking system.
Right, and then an AI HR filter scans it, looks for the keyword AI transition team, and just passes her through. I mean, we have essentially created a dystopia where AI resume bots are fighting AI HR filters.
Exactly.
And the actual human truth is completely lost in the middle. The hiring system is broken precisely because we treat claims as proof.
Yes. And the LPR advisor steps into that exact dystopia and says, stop. The advisor's job is not to be a language polisher. When Sarah says, I led the team, the advisor's job is to ask what supports this.
Right.
What does the evidence actually prove? What does it not prove? What context is missing? And crucially, what privacy boundary applies?
Yeah, the privacy piece is huge.
It is, because a claim without evidence becomes generic professionalism. But a claim connected to evidence, context, and privacy judgment, that can become grounded professionalism.
See, that is a great forensic exercise in theory. But put yourself in the room with Sarah. You ask her, what proves you led the AI transition? And she says, well, I ran the daily stand-ups, I smoothed over the massive fights between engineering and marketing, and the tool launched on time.
Okay.
There is no corporate certificate for smoothing over interpersonal fights. There's no official artifact for invisible emotional labor.
I see why you think that. But let me give you a different perspective. Think of this process like an IRS tax audit.
Oh, come on, the IRS?
Hear me out. You can claim you donated $10,000 to charity on your tax return. The IRS isn't calling you a liar when they ask for the receipt, but that claim on your return is just a placeholder until you produce the documentation. If Sarah says she led an AI transition, we need the receipts.
But that's completely unfair to the employee. Your IRS analogy assumes the receipt even exists to begin with. What if the charity in this case never issues receipts?
If her boss didn't track the hours she spent in one-on-one conflict resolution, why should she be penalized? I mean, if we strictly follow your rules, our listeners are going to end up with 2-sentence resumes because they didn't save their emails from 3 jobs ago.
They won't end up with 2-sentence resumes. They will end up with highly defensible ones. Look, if we don't demand the receipt, we are just playing the old game of writing fiction, where whoever tells the most compelling story wins. Which brings us directly to the tension between skills and credentials.
Okay, let's look at how the LPR system treats skills. It explicitly states that skills are claims. Saying you have strategic leadership is an empty vessel until you prove where it was used, under what conditions, and with what outcome.
I come at it from a different way, because we really need to talk about the limits of credentials in proving those skills. You want hard proof, right?
Yes.
Let's say Sarah actually does have a piece of paper. Let's say she has a project management professional credential. Does that prove she is a strategic leader? The source material warns us explicitly here, credentials prove facts, not meaning.
They prove bounded facts. A standard was met, a degree was earned. It is a verified point in reality.
It proves a bounded fact, sure, but a project management certificate only proves that a course was completed and a test was passed. It does not automatically prove mature capability.
But it's a baseline.
But it doesn't prove Sarah has judgment under pressure, or the ability to navigate a highly political software rollout when her budget gets slashed in half. So, if the credential is structurally incapable of capturing the chaos of the real world, the actual meaning of her work has to rely almost entirely on her unverified narrative. Her narrative has to carry the weight, because the hard proof falls short.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because you're treating the narrative as if it can stand completely on its own. Yes, a credential is only a bounded fact, but it is an anchor.
An anchor?
Yes. Without that anchor, without the work sample, the calendar trace, the feedback email, or the credential, the ship of her unverified narrative just drifts off into pure fiction.
It doesn't drift if her memory, what the LPR calls operational texture, is rigorous enough. Operational texture isn't just telling a slick story to sound impressive. It is a highly granular memory of operational realities. The material asks precise questions. Communication between whom? What information was missing? What was the risk of misunderstanding?
But notice what the advisor is still required to do. The advisor is still hunting for evidence.
Right, but look at how specific the texture can be. Instead of Sarah just saying, "I improved communication," the textured version is, "The marketing team didn't understand the API limits, so I created a weekly translation document to bridge the gap between them and the developers, preventing weekly rollout delays."
Okay, that's better.
And there might be no surviving artifact of that weekly document because it was deleted off the server a year ago, but the sheer specificity of the constraint, the actors, and the outcome grounds the claim in reality. We don't need a surviving copy of the document to know she did the work.
We might know she believes she did the work, but an advisor cannot responsibly stamp that as a verified evidence. And this becomes incredibly dangerous when we get into the impact of the work.
Let's say Sarah claims this weekly document saved a massive amount of time.
A classic scenario.
And the company, like 99% of companies out there, never actually track the time.
Right. And the LPR system is extremely clear here. Do not invent metrics. You don't just write increased efficiency by 30% because it sounds good or because the AI resume bot suggested it. You have to find real proof.
Yes, it strictly forbids inventing the metric, but we have to look at what it encourages instead. It encourages using measure clues. Things like reduced repeated questions, fewer handoff errors, broader team visibility. The system explicitly accepts unverified qualitative changes as valid evidence of impact. It doesn't say to Sarah, because you don't have the time tracking spreadsheet, you cannot claim you improved efficiency. It says, use the measure clue. That is the LPR system accepting unverified operational reality as sufficient grounding.
Well, let's walk through how an advisor actually handles a measure clue, though, because I think you're misinterpreting its function in the methodology. Measure clues are evidence leads. They're not final proofs.
I mean, they are the reality of the work.
They are breadcrumbs. When Sarah says it saved a lot of time, the advisor doesn't just write down reduced handoff errors and call it a day. The advisor has to forensically question the client. Show me the mechanism.
Okay.
They ask, how do you know it saved time, Sarah? Did the engineering lead comment on it in an email? Was there a before and after comparison we can find in a Slack channel? If Sarah says no to all of that, the measure clue remains a claim needing confirmation.
Okay, but put yourself back in that forensic interview. You are sitting across from Sarah.
She admits she doesn't have the Slack logs because she left the company 6 months ago. She has no emails. She has no dashboard. Are you really going to tell her she can't claim she improved the process? Because if so, you are forcing her to underclaim.
I am going to tell her she can articulate the claim responsibly, mapping the exact limits of her truth. Let's look at the evidence to claim summary sheet mentioned in the source material.
Oh, right.
The workflow is strictly linear for a reason. It moves from experience to evidence to measure clues to context to before-after and finally to the public rendering. Notice that evidence comes second. Right after she identifies the experience, we look for the evidence. If all she has is a memory of fewer handoff errors, the source strength is marked as weak.
But it is still recorded on the sheet.
It is recorded, so the advisor knows exactly how fragile the claim is. That is how he prevents the critical error of overclaiming. Because the evidence is weak, she cannot responsibly render a public claim that she revolutionized cross-departmental efficiency. She might only be able to responsibly claim that she implemented a weekly update format that clarified open issues. The strict evaluation of the evidence dictates the volume and intensity of the public wording.
And I would argue that process prevents the equally critical error of underclaiming. Think about the client who comes in and says, "I don't have evidence, I have nothing." A weak advisor says, "That's okay, we can just write around it." The LPR-aligned advisor says, "Let's not assume there is no evidence. Let's look for feedback, calendar traces, witnesses, memory triggers."
Right, we dig deeper.
Exactly. The system actively works to expand the definition of evidence beyond official documents to ensure the worker isn't silenced by their own lack of archiving skills. Because in the real world, a highly textured, responsible claim often must stand in for proof, because actual proof is locked behind insurmountable walls.
You're building to the privacy constraints.
Absolutely. The privacy paradox. Proof is not permission. This is a massive part of the LPR training, and it is the ultimate roadblock for your strict evidentiary foundationalism. Evidence-rich does not mean evidence exposed.
Well, the advisor must protect the worker from exposure.
Agreed, but let's look at Sarah again. Let's say she actually does have the proof. She has the proprietary codebase. She has the internal transition reports. She has the highly confidential performance reviews of her team members that prove she resolved the conflicts. She has the absolute best evidence of her strategic leadership.
But she ethically and legally cannot share it. She cannot upload it to a public tool.
Exactly. She cannot show that to a future employer. If she uploads it, she violates her NDAs. So look at the necessary outcome of that protection. If the LPR system requires these artifacts to be hidden, redacted, or excluded, then the public-facing resume is just a list of claims anyway.
Well,
The hiring manager still just has to take her word for it because the proof is locked behind a privacy wall by design. If you demand visible evidence before wording, you are demanding something the worker is strictly forbidden to provide.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently because I think you are heavily conflating the public rendering with the internal record.
How so?
Yes, the public-facing resume might only use a safe summary. It might just say, manage a confidential AI integration project resulting in adoption by a 50-person team. The actual code base isn't attached to her LinkedIn profile. But behind the scenes, the advisor must still conduct the internal evidence inventory.
But the advisor doesn't look at the proprietary code either. The source material explicitly tells students, do not ask clients to upload confidential, proprietary, or employer-owned material into your tools.
The advisor doesn't read the code, no, but they facilitate the client's inventory of that material through a metadata-only entry. Let me explain it using a library analogy. Think of a metadata-only entry like a library catalog card.
Okay. The public and even the advisor do not get to open the book and read the confidential pages inside. But the catalog card tells you the book exists. It tells you who authored it, the data was created, the file format, and the exact physical dimensions of the project.
So Sarah is essentially telling the advisor, I have the receipts, but they are in a locked box.
Yes, she logs the metadata, she connects the claim to a specific privacy judgment. That means the evidence exists internally. The client acknowledges it exists, evaluates its source strength, and then consciously applies a privacy boundary to keep it safe.
But it is still hidden. A hidden foundation is still a foundation. You know the concrete footings are 50 feet underground, even if you can't see them holding up the building. But what you are advocating for, letting memory and operational texture entirely substitute for evidence, is akin to drawing a picture of a foundation and just hoping the building stands up when a storm hits. A hidden foundation is safe. A missing foundation is a lie.
I hear your library card analogy and, well, it's elegant, but practically speaking, the hiring manager still only sees the outside of the locked box. They are still relying on a claim. And the advisor is still relying on Sarah's operational texture to describe the size and shape of that locked box.
True.
We are constantly forcing professionals to bear the weight of proof through their heavily textured words. The LPR system elevates operational texture and measure clues precisely because it knows hard evidence is fragile. It gives the worker a vocabulary to claim their truth when the documents are gone.
It gives them a vocabulary to map reality, not to invent it. Which actually brings us to a really vital point of convergence, because for all our disagreement about where the burden of proof lies, both of our perspectives require an incredibly intense forensic look at the worker's history.
Yes. Where we agree completely is what the advisor is not. The advisor is never just a language polisher.
The source material is absolutely adamant about this. The practices of, beating the applicant tracking system, or using AI to hallucinate or inflate claims, or inventing metrics, they're universally rejected. An AI output is just a prior rendering. It is not source truth. A job posting is just market context. It does not prove the client actually possesses a skill.
Right. If Sarah comes in and says, the job posting asks for cross-functional project management, so let's just add cross-functional project management, the advisor doesn't just sprinkle that keyword into her profile.
Never.
They use that market context as a prompt to go back into a record and hunt for operational texture. Did she coordinate timelines across departments? Did she track risks between engineering and marketing? The goal is discovering what the professional record actually supports, whether through hard artifacts or highly textured bounded claims.
And as we summarize our positions today, my stance remains that the journey from generic to grounded professionalism strictly requires evidence before wording. Even if that evidence is shielded by strict privacy parameters and reduced to a metadata library card, or expressed through qualitative measure clues rather than hard spreadsheets, the internal verification of what the record supports is non-negotiable. We have to evaluate the source strength. A credential only proves a bounded fact. A claim is never proof. It is only through rigorous evidentiary foundationalism that we protect the worker from the catastrophic risk of overclaiming.
And my summary is that while the discipline of evidence is absolutely necessary, the realities of modern work demand elasticity. Bounded credentials rarely capture the complex meaning of a job. Strict privacy parameters mean that detailed, textured claims must often bear the weight of proof themselves externally. By utilizing measure clues and rigorous operational texture, an advisor can ground a professional's history accurately. This prevents the tragic error of underclaiming, ensuring that a worker's valid lived experience is recognized, even when the company paperwork simply isn't there.
It is a profound tension, and it's one that every professional and LPR advisor must navigate case by case. There is so much more to explore in this material, particularly in how tools like the evidence to claims summary sheet operationalize this exact debate in daily practice. It leaves all of us to carefully consider how we evaluate our own professional histories.
Indeed. Are we relying on polished surfaces and generative text? Or do we actually know what supports our claims?
We leave it to you, the listener, to decide which standard of proof is most practical for the realities of your work. The next time you sit down to update your resume or your professional profile, ask yourself, do you actually have the internal evidence to back up your history, or are you just asking the world for blind faith? Thank you for joining us.